Joining us now is Dr. Rand Paul, an eye surgeon from Bowling Green, Kentucky, and also a Senate candidate if in next year's race to replace retiring Republican Senator Jim Bunning. Dr. Paul, thank you for joining us.
Good to be with you, Sam.
As both a Senate candidate and a doctor, what is your view on the health care debate going on in Congress right now?
I think the first thing you have to ask with health care is, we do have a problem, but what does our problem stem from? Does our problem stem from too much government already involved in medicine or too little government? I think most of the proposals now in Washington assume that capitalism has failed or that capitalism doesn't work in health care. But I would argue that we don't have any capitalism in healthcare now, and that maybe we should go the other direction. Instead of more government, let's go to see how does the marketplace work for cell phones? Or how does the marketplace work for contact lenses? How does the marketplace work for LASIK surgery? Things that you pay for, things that you pay cash for, the price has been going down for years. So I think there are other ways to look at it other than just saying, do we need more government? I'd say, how do we figure out how to grab the great engine of capitalism and install it or bring it into healthcare?
As a doctor's perspective, how effective do you view the U.S. health insurance system now?
Well, I think the biggest problem is that you have private ownership. The physicians own their practices. They make profit. But you don't have price mobility. So part of capitalism is private ownership and profit, but capitalism only works for the consumer if you have price mobility, if prices go up and down. But for example, what I do in my practice, 50% is Medicare, 5% is Medicaid. So over half of what I do is paid for by the government. All those prices are fixed. So if you're over 65 and you get cataract surgery anywhere in the whole country, you pay the same price. So there is no mobility of prices. Then it's legislated. We come to Washington and the doctors all ask for an increase, the consumers ask for a decrease, but there is no marketplace. So nobody knows what the price of cataract surgery should be. And then even when you go to private insurance, let's say you have Blue Cross or Anthem or Humana, that's 40% of what I do. The prices are still fixed. All the doctors in my town say charge the same rate because we make a deal with Humana. So when you come in, there is no consumerism. There is no consumer price, and that's what we need. To get there, though, you have to have higher deductibles. But when people say, oh, higher deductible, I don't want a higher deductible, if you have a higher deductible, you'll have a lower premium. And I do it personally. I have a $5,000 deductible, and I pay a lot less. I save $7,000 to $8,000 a year by having a higher deductible. Now, I do have to pay when I go in, but then you would have a marketplace for people paying, which would drive prices down.
What do you think Congress needs to do in health insurance?
Well, I think there are two problems. There's one is access and one's expense. I think the whole debate is being driven by access. So with access right now, they say there are 46 million people without insurance, and that's driving the debate. But they're counterproductive. If you increase access, you will increase expense. The 46 million people who don't have insurance now, about a third of them make more than $50,000 a year. About a third of them are without insurance for less than 3 or 4 months. A third of them are eligible for Medicaid but don't bother to sign up. Why don't they sign up for Medicaid? It's too much of a bother because they can just show up at the emergency room and they have access. So I think really we're driving the debate by the look at access. But really what makes people mad, and what makes even me mad, I can afford my insurance, but my insurance is going up 17% a year with a $5,000 deductible. So the expense side of the equation is out of control, and that's what we have to look at is the expense. And then we have to say, well, what do we want to do? Just have controls? Have more price controls? Well, price controls, most economists now admit that it's not good to control the price of bread. It's not good to control the price of cell phones or TVs. So why would it be good to control the price of health care? And that's what's going to happen. We're going to get insurance reform, but it's going to mean price controls and regulations. Whereas I would say, how do we make health care more like cell phones? You can go to Walmart and get a cell phone for $14 now. You can get a TV for the same price you got one 30 years ago. So there's incredible productivity and the marketplace works. And if you're a believer in capitalism, why not introduce capitalism into healthcare instead of introducing European socialism to healthcare?
One question before we go to calls. You have described yourself on your website as, quote, a career doctor, not a politician. Why are you running for the Senate?
Because I'm worried. I'm worried about the direction our country's going in, and I would really, my family and many friends, everybody would say, why would you want to go into politics? You're in a profession where physicians are almost universally respected and politicians are almost universally disrespected. Why do it? The deficit is enormous. I mean, we're going to have a deficit next year of 13% of our gross national product. And I don't think either side's getting it. When the Republicans were in charge for 8 years, we doubled the debt from $5 to $10 trillion. Now the Democrats are in charge and they're accelerating the deficit. And I don't think it's just our kids or our grandkids who are going to pay for this. I think we'll pay for it more imminently through price inflation. We've doubled the monetary base. There's a lot of money getting ready to percolate into the system. And when it does, you're going to see significant rises at the pump and significant rises in the grocery store. And there will be a huge debate going on in our country, I think, within a year over inflation.
Let's go to our calls. From Charlotte, North Carolina, we have Antonio.
Hello.
Good morning.
How you doing? I wanted to ask, I guess Kennedy ran a question.
Go ahead.
Okay, well, he's talking about need more capitalism in the healthcare system, and I understand that. But my point is that, you know, I ain't going to say Republicans, I say the politicians, because Republicans and Democrats both they're giving companies billions and maybe trillions of dollars in tax breaks to move jobs overseas. So, well, we have 30 million now that doesn't have health insurance. I mean, we're looking at 2 years down the road, and we might be talking about 60 million. And it's not because they don't want to buy it or can't afford it. It's because their jobs have went overseas because we're taking the taxpayer money to get these companies money to hire millions of Chinese and India. In India, you know, and their companies are booming. And you know, American company is lagging, and we keep talking about a deficit. But isn't that deficit was already started years ago? And right now, the Democrats, they have to spend money to try and reverse the deficit because no one's going to take the tax break back from them companies because they're lining all the politicians' pockets. And so when it comes to health care, I mean, when it comes to Americans, can't we just get something out of government? I mean, besides capitalism, because we do the most, but yet we receive the least. I mean, you look at China. China basically getting oil basically free, and while Americans, we're doing so much for these countries, and we're paying sky-high prices for oil.
Good questions, lots of them. I would not subsidize big business to go overseas. So direct subsidies from government to business, I think, are a mistake. You talk about people losing jobs and having trouble affording insurance, and that's exactly right. The problem is the expense. Not so much the access, but it's the expense. And I think the way that you reduce expenses is by changing our philosophy on insurance. What you need is health insurance that looks more like term life insurance. Currently, if you get term life insurance, you get a multi-year, maybe a 20-year contract. So that way, if you get sick during your term life insurance, the rate doesn't change and the amount doesn't change. So what you need is really something more like term life insurance that would be much less expensive. It also wouldn't be associated with your employment. You would buy it individually, but instead of $800 a month, you might be looking at $800 a year. You would pay for most of your health care out of your pocket. But the advantage would be that it would drive prices down. So you would have competition, and competition does work, and we have no competition. So when I say capitalism, also think competition, because I think they're interchangeable words. And to have true capitalism, you have to have competition, and that will drive prices down and make it more affordable for everyone.
South Attleboro, Massachusetts, we have Elsie on the Republican line.
Hello?
Good morning.
Good morning. I thought he was a senator. He's not. He's a candidate for senator, right?
Correct.
So he wouldn't know. Question. I wanted to know if the Social Security is dead or what, or in Medicare. I want to know because I'm 81 years old, and I just lost my husband, which was a veteran due for medicine, and I'm here trying to figure out if I'm going to have Social Security to pay my bills. I'm 81, and I took care of him, and I did everything I could. And you are sitting up there trying to run for the Senate. If you ever get in, tell the truth. Is Social Security dead? I'm depending on it to live. I can't get a job at 81 years old. There's no jobs to have.
Right. Well, I think that's a good question. Is Social Security dead? Social Security is running short of money, and so is Medicare. And the reason they're running short of money is we used to have 7 workers for every retiree. Now we have about 1 worker for every retiree. So the demographics are difficult. So it's not that they're dead and that they're going to run out of money, but they eventually will because we don't have enough workers for retirees. But that's why we shouldn't increase or add to the benefits. During the 8 years of the Republican administration, we added Medicare prescription drug plans, and there are some senior citizens who can't afford drugs, but when we gave all senior citizens free drugs, we sped up the demise and the bankruptcy of Medicare. That also should be driving the debate now, because they're talking about adding 46 million people. Some of them are not citizens also. They're talking about adding these people into the healthcare realm and having government or having the taxpayer pay for it. So we are running short of money. The other thing I would say is that you have to realize that nothing in life is free. In fact, P.J. O'Rourke likes to say, you think healthcare is expensive now, wait till it's free. Nothing's really free. You will have to pay taxes for these things. Will Social Security and Medicare continue to exist? Yes. But the real question you have to ask is, if we have 10% inflation next year and you only get a 2% cost of living raise, will your Social Security check be able to buy anything in the grocery store? That's the real question. That's where your real danger is. Not that Social Security will fail, but that your prices in the grocery store will rise faster than your Social Security payment.
On the independent line, we have Gary from Azle, Texas.
Yes. Now, I'm a medically retired postal worker, but I'm medically retired basically because of my military disability from the 70s. Now, I spent over 25 years at the post office, and I've seen all different kinds of stuff. And I have, I guess they'd call that a Cadillac health plan from the post office, because it's the Federal Employees Health Benefits Plan. But here in Texas, I've seen some of the doctors that have actually dropped some of these from the Federal Employees Health Benefits because they can't negotiate a price on, for PPO and stuff like that, and they won't accept the price. And back in the 80s, we had to take and fight some of the insurance companies because they sat there and wouldn't pay for some veterans on their disabilities because they called it pre-existing condition. And the way I feel and other veterans feel, if there's a company in this country that's going to say, okay, well, we're not going to do this vet because he's got a pre-existing condition, they don't deserve to do business in this country.
Right. I've always kind of joked and said that the congressmen should go to the VA for their health care and the veterans should get the congressional health care, and that might shape up the VA system pretty quickly here in this country. But I think you're right, and what happens is, if you have declining rates of payment for physicians, there will be a breaking point where physicians will quit taking. There are already some physicians who won't take Medicare because the rates become so low. All of the health care proposals now, when they say they're going to get efficiency or they're going to squeeze more money out of the system and somehow it won't cost us anything to add 46 million people to the insurance, it will cost, and it will ultimately have to lead to rationing or reduction in payment to physicians. But ultimately, if you don't pay physicians to do the work, you won't have physicians accepting the insurance, and that runs into more problems. And so really what you don't want is more government involvement. I say, think of FEMA. When you think of government-run insurance, think of FEMA distributing water at the Superdome. They couldn't do the most basic things at the Superdome. Why would you want government to be involved in your health care? What they have now, we have Medicare, and it sort of works, but it's chronically short of money. So why would we want to make Medicare bigger or make government-run health care bigger? Because they're chronically short of money. Who do you want to make the decision on what we spend on health care? Do you want government making those decisions, or you want you and your doctor? How much are you worth? If you have 6 months to live, are you only worth $20,000 if we can increase your lifespan a year? That's what happens in England. They decide that you only have $25,000 worth of medicine. If your medicine's going to cost $50,000 and it only extends your life 6 months, you're not worth it. And do we want government making those decisions, or do you want the individual, you, your mother, your grandmother, and your doctor sitting in a room deciding what your mother needs or grandmother needs, or do you want government making those decisions? And I think Americans, if we debate this long enough and hard enough, are going to tell the politicians up here they don't want the government making their decisions for health care.
One of our viewers, Bill Smith, writes on our Twitter page, are you pro-life? And what do you think about Republican Chairman Michael Steele okaying pro-abortion Republican candidates and not following the party platform?
I am pro-life. I think it's wrong for the national groups to get involved in the state races, particularly when they're for someone who is promoting things that are against the platform. In my race, a big deal is I'm steadfastly against the bank bailout, and I tell every Republican voter I meet in Kentucky, and our platform says we don't believe in bailing out private businesses, and yet half the Republican leadership up here voted for the bank bailout. And a lot of those people who voted for the bank bailout are coming to Kentucky and giving buckets of cash to my Republican opponent, and I wish they'd stay out of my race and stay out of my state and let the people in Kentucky decide, what's best for Kentucky.
All right, let's go to our next call from Reston, Virginia. We have Cheryl in on the Democratic line.
Good morning. Thanks for C-SPAN. I think that the candidate really raises an interesting point about the lack of capitalism in healthcare. But by drawing an analogy to telephone service, I think you're missing a very important element that most of us all know, which is that healthcare is not like a cell phone. If I don't have a cell phone, I'm not going to die. If I have a heart attack, I'm in need of health care, and if I don't have that health care, I may very well die. And so I would contend that health care is not a commodity that you can buy and purchase and sell, and that it is far closer to a right to which all people should have access. Therefore, we can't buy and trade it on the open market. Because ultimately, people cannot walk away from the purchase of their health care without walking away from this life.
I think it's a good point. It's a very important debate, and it is the debate we should have in Washington over whether health care is a right or not a right. If you say health care is a right, you have to then argue that you have a right to someone's labor. You have a right to involuntary servitude, because it's just not me as a physician. It's the janitor at the hospital, the nurse at the hospital, the administrator at the hospital, the people who build the hospitals, the people who invest. Do you have a right to their labor? I don't think you can have a right to something like that. You can have a right to an abstraction, like the pursuit of happiness, but you can't have a right to happiness. When you go back to healthcare, can healthcare be like a cell phone? Maybe not always, but about 90% of your health care you get is elective and done on a reasoned and slow fashion. Even a heart attack can be pre-negotiated in advance, and is a lot of times through health insurance pre-negotiated the rates. So yes, you do need capitalism, you do need price mobility, because the problem is if we only look at access and we put all these people in the system, we did nothing about expense. And really what most of us are complaining about is the expense. So if we lump all these people in, then the only way to control expense is through top-down sort of regulations and rationing and restrictioning of healthcare. So most healthcare actually is non-emergent. For the emergent part, we have 100% access. And that's something that can't be emphasized enough when they say people don't have health insurance. 100% of Americans have access to emergency care. It's been that way in the era of government, but it was also that way in the era before government. So we have 100% access. If you break your arm, every doctor in the country will see you, and every hospital will see you regardless of your ability to pay. So that's important for us to know.
Next call, Daytona Beach, Florida. Mary on the Republican line.
Hello. Good morning. My statement today, I would like to suggest that we do have a problem with health care in this country, and we do have many people that need help that don't have help. My husband and I have never, ever earned over more than $50,000 a year. We raised 3 children. We had insurance for the children. We did without insurance ourselves to make sure they were covered. However, I think the biggest problem in our country is we're not really paying attention to preventative for the future. Our children today in school do not have to take gym class. They talk about the obesity problem in our country. Part of it is because our children are in school 7 and 8 hours a day, not getting physical exercise, not getting proper nutrition, and not getting enough attention by the community to make sure that they have what they need to fight these flus and what have you. I think if we start on a basis of making sure the children have what they need, and then the emergency cares and what have you that are needed along the way are taken care of, our nation would be healthier, and this health problem would not be as bad as it is today.
Right.
Thank you.
I think those are very good points. I think preventative medicine, being healthy, being thin, being fit are very important. And any time government's involved with paying for things, I would not have government pay for unhealthy things. So for example, if government's paying for the food and deciding what food is sold in the high schools, there's no reason you should have sugary drinks in there, and you should have exercise as part of the school day. The same way when you receive food stamps from government, those food stamps shouldn't be going for soft drinks and chips. I think we should restrict where they go, and at the very least it should be going towards only very healthy foods, you know, bread, water, milk, meat, the staples of the diet, but we shouldn't be allowing people to use food stamps to buy Coca-Cola and chips.
Next call, St. Augustine, Florida. Scott on the Independent line.
First thing I want to say is I'm not a cell phone. I'm not a TV, which, by the way, we don't make in this country anymore. Number two, capitalism is a complete and total failure. If it wasn't, the rich wouldn't be running towards socialism. The rich knows capitalism is a failure. That's why they ran to the government for protection. See, down here on the bottom, we get 24/7 capitalism. We know it doesn't work. And what I don't understand is why people like you don't know it doesn't work. I mean, the rich knows. Won't you go ask them? They're all very socialist. Down here, we don't get any socialism because of you. Thanks to you, we won't have health care. Thanks to you, we won't have jobs. Thanks a lot.
Well, as far as capitalism being a failure, there's a great story. Back in the early 80s, the Soviet Union wanted to run a propaganda film to say how horrible capitalism was. And so they showed a video, and it was one of the not-so-great-looking buildings in New York City. Had some broken windows, and it was run down. But it backfired on them because they showed the poorest people in our society, and you know what they found as they scanned down the building? Color television sets in almost every window. The poorest people in our country compared to the middle class and the rich in most of the rest of the world. Capitalism is without argument the engine that has brought the greatest wealth and the greatest humanitarianism to every strata. Sure, we have rich people in our country, but we have a country where Bill Gates became the richest man in the world and his parents were teachers. He was ordinary middle class. We have a country that has great mobility, and most countries don't have that. They have a propertied elite or a royalty or a communist elite in China or other countries like that. We have an incredibly free and mobile society, and it's not perfect. There are poor, but the poorest in our society are richer than most countries, and we should be thankful and understand capitalism and how it brings great wealth and humanitarianism to everyone.
On the Democratic line, we have Tino from California. Tino, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Go ahead.
My question and comment for Mr. Paul, I would like to ask, while his party had control of the House and the Senate 15 years ago, why was there not a call for health care reform then? And why is there such a resentment now that Barack Obama, the first African-American president in office, is trying to do something for the people? And also, why aren't you rebuking any of these Tea Party meetings that are calling Obama racist, Obama, Hitler, and everything else? Can you please respond?
Yeah, well, I don't engage in anything calling the president racist or Hitler or things like that. I don't think that's appropriate dialogue and not good for us or the country or for the conservative movement. But as far as for calling for health care reform, I think you make a good point. When Republicans were in charge, they didn't do anything with health care reform. And I think that's part of our problem as a party. I think we're doing a good job at pointing out the problems with what President Obama is proposing. European-style socialism is not a good answer for us. Having the government run healthcare is not a good answer. And we are doing, I think, a pretty good job of proposing how your choices on insurance will be restricted. You may not be able to buy a health savings account if the Democrat plan gets passed. We're doing a good job of pointing that out. But what we do need to do is understand that there is a problem in our country. There is an access problem and there's an expense problem. But my question is the basic question we started this interview with was, do we want to go towards more government or less government? Do our problems exist now because we have too much government involvement in medicine or too little government involvement? I would say we as Republicans need to promote a plan, yes. We need to have an alternative. And I think there is an alternative. We need to make health insurance more like term life insurance. Multi-year plans that would get rid of portability problems, that would get rid of pre-existing problems, and it would get rid of expense problems because you would have higher deductibles. And when you had higher deductibles, you would have freely floating prices, and competition drives prices down. Competition works in every segment of the economy, and while healthcare has some unique aspects, and we aren't a cell phone, we are more important than that, it is a service industry, and we need to figure out how to get competition to work in a service industry. And you can't negotiate for your heart attack, but you could, well, when you have to get an eye exam once a year because you're diabetic, you could call 3 or 4 different doctors and find out what the price is. And you could choose some based on quality and some based on price, but we have none of that. That's what works in all the rest of the marketplace, but nothing in healthcare is driven by price because you have an intermediary, you have the insurance company, and it doesn't work. So it's not working because we don't have enough capitalism. We need capitalism, which means competition, which means mobility of prices. That's what we need to bring into healthcare.
Fort Myers, Florida, Bobby on the Republican line.
Yeah, I think it's funny that when President Bush was in office, and even before him, when President Clinton was in office, that the Democrats would say, oh, well, the Republicans are trying to get in our bedroom. But when I hear these Democrats say, well, you know, you need preventative care, you need a colonoscopy, I can't help but think they're just trying to get up in my asshole.
Next call. New York City, Robert on the Independent line.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, for the candidate, thanks for taking my call, by the way. I think it's a little unfair for the candidate to say that categorically government involvement is always bad. I mean, we have the armed forces. I mean, Medicare, like you said, and Social Security have certainly worked. And, I mean, he's in Congress, for goodness sakes. I mean, that's a government-run program. As far as his statement about the non-citizens getting care, I mean, that's the situation is now. Obviously, if an illegal alien is in an automobile accident, I don't think that the candidate is going to expect that person should not get care, and the Obama plan is not changing that. My final point is that if he wants capitalism to work in health care, then he should be in support of the Democratic plan, because that's essentially what they're trying to do with that plan. Thank you for my call.
Well, I don't think the Democrat plan is injecting capitalism. Almost all of the plan involves mandates. They force you to buy insurance, but they're also going to give you a big tax or penalty if you don't buy the insurance, but they're also going to tell you which insurance you can buy. See, we did it in Kentucky in 1994. We had health care reform similar to this Obama plan, and 35 of 37 insurance companies left the state and quit selling insurance because they couldn't make a profit under those rules. So really, no, we're not going towards capitalism, we're going away from capitalism. I have a health savings account. It's the only part of healthcare that is working because it drives costs down, because I have to pay when I go to the doctor, and I'm only covered for catastrophic illness. And that is what works, and that's capitalism. But under the Democratic plan, if I lose my insurance or have to buy another policy, that health savings account will likely not be approved by the Democrat committees that are approving what insurance can be sold.
We have to leave it there. Dr. Paul, thank you for coming in.
Thank you.
Next up, we're going to talk with Dr. Edward Miller of Johns Hopkins University, continuing our discussion on healthcare. We'll be right back.